Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for joining us for what should be a really exciting panel. We've got robotics harnessing the power of technology. Should be really exciting. Got three really accomplished individuals here to talk about their business and some of the cool stuff they're working on. So I'd like to do introductions here. First, we have Eric Adamson, who is the co-founder and CEO of Tortuga AgTech. Eric comes from a family of farmers and is an advocate for building a healthier society and planet through smarter farming. Prior to founding Tortuga in 2016, Eric worked in management consulting at McKinsey, serving clients in a number of industries, including agriculture. Eric holds a bachelor's and master's from Stanford University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. We also have Sébastien Boyer, who is the co-founder and CEO of Farmwise. Before co-founding Farmwise, Sébastien worked as a mathematician for IBM Research and a data scientist for Facebook. He holds a master's in electrical engineering and computer sciences from MIT, where he studied machine learning and recent advances in computer vision. While at MIT, he won the machine learning for the digital economy competition. He is passionate about developing technologies that address long-term environmental sustainability problems. He was one of the winners of Innovators Under 35 Europe 2018 from MIT Technology Review and named to the 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Lastly, we have Igino Cafiero, who is an entrepreneur, engineer, and co-founder at Bear Flag Robotics, building autonomous technology for farm tractors. Prior to founding Bear Flag, he was an early engineer for NCME Networks, which was acquired by Cisco Systems in 2013. He founded his first company in 2007, a profitable automotive parts marketing company in the midst of the Great Recession. In addition to frequent public speaking events and podcast appearances, he has been featured in the New York Times, CNBC, Farm Futures, Silicon Valley Business Journal, TechCrunch, and more. Igino earned a BS in electrical and computer engineering from Carnegie Mellon University, an MS in electrical engineering from Stanford University, and an MBA from the Wharton School. All right, guys, and just one reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, please use the ask a question function down at the bottom, and then we'll manage that and make sure we get to as many of those as possible. But now I'd like to go ahead and jump in. Just first and foremost, I'd like you guys to take a little bit of time, tell us about your company, what the mission is, and how it goes about achieving that mission. So anyone want to jump in, feel free to go ahead.
Also go first. Okay, I can take it if you want, guys. Hi everyone, we're very glad to be here today. So we're at Farmwise, we build robots to help vegetable farmers deal with two of the major issues that they're having. On the one side, labor shortages. So we help them automating some of the most tedious tasks, such as weeding on the field. And on the other hand, we help them reduce the amount of chemicals that they use through innovations such as mechanical weeding as opposed to herbicides. We're a 3-year-old. We're based in California, and we have offices in San Francisco and Salinas, about 50 people. And this year is our first commercial year. So we're effectively deploying robots, fleets of robots throughout fields here in the Salinas Valley over this summer.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. My name's Eric, CEO of Tortuga AgTech. Our mission is to build a healthier society and a thriving planet through smarter farming. And of course, per the topic of the panel, we build robots as well. We focus specifically on the problem of harvesting, and in many fruits and vegetables, the vast majority of the labor cost is in harvest, and plants are still harvested by hand. So we are tackling this first and foremost by harvesting strawberries. And we're doing that focused specifically on the types of grows that are what some people would call hydroponic or controlled environment agriculture, but is not such a thing as vertical farming. Instead, we're talking about things like light polycarbonate tunnels outside or a glass house. These are really well-established industries that are gaining market share worldwide. We're starting there. A lot of other crops on the horizon, and we start with the harvest problem. But of course, once you're there collecting all of that data, there's a lot of powerful things you can do for the farmer to help them with not only their labor problem, but also their information problem.
Awesome. I'm Igino Cafiero. I'm the founder of Bear Flag Robotics. The simple consumable one-liner for our company is we build autonomous technology for farm tractors. We don't build the tractors themselves. Our model is to procure the machines from the OEMs. So consider, your John Deere, C&H, Kubota, New Holland, etc. Bring them into the shop, add our sensors and compute to those machines necessary to make them autonomous, and then deploy them to growers. The idea is that every month that you farm with Bear Flag is a month that you save on your operational expense and increase your productivity. While we have a number of tasks we can do, we're focused on land prep and tillage right now.
Great. Yeah, it's, good stuff. So, kind of difficult to have a conversation these days without bringing up COVID-19. So, really would just like to hear how you guys think COVID-19 is impacting the direction or trajectory of your company and the way it innovates. It can be on your basis of your company, kind of agriculture, industry at large. Anything would be great here.
I'm happy to jump first. I think just like any industry, barring a very, very small few, the pandemic is just extremely disruptive in the short term. Our customers have cash flow problems. Our customers are currently dealing with active outbreaks in their picker populations. A couple of those have actually hit the newswire. But in the long term, I think this, subset of innovation more than any is going to benefit from, any pandemic, not just COVID-19. Robots don't necessarily get sick or have to wash their hands and can continue working when humans may not be willing to or able to. So I think the story around automation on farm was already a very strong story with a lot of tailwinds. Adding a pandemic to that, I think, is only stronger for all three of our companies.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Totally agree. And one of the sort of happy byproducts of being in land prep is, we are naturally socially distanced. And as you see growers turning over fields for planting, optimistic that food sales will continue to rise, and in fact finding new channels outside of just food services themselves. The need is still there, and certainly so when you look at applications such as land prep, we have stayed pretty busy. Echoing what Eric says, though, the cash flow problem is real, and so being flexible with growers and meeting them where they are. I think what this looks like on the other side, as you see operations really rethinking, where they're spending capital and what their organizations look like, switching to a variable cost model through automation and through robotics makes a ton of sense. It's something that at Bear Flag we've been talking about since the inception of the company. Like what do operations look like when it's lower fixed costs and higher variable costs? What would you do if you don't need to think about the staff to do it or the traditional equipment ownership models to do that? And more think of it through a service model, through a pay-as-you-go, charging by the acre or by the hour or whatnot, or by the unit there. And those sorts of pricing models are looking extremely attractive to growers right now. And if we do see an inflection point, maybe COVID has been the forcing function for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with both Eric and Gino here. I'll add that different growers are obviously impacted differently based on their own customer base and the segments that they serve. But across the board, like we see, as in many other industries, a lot of short-term need for cost reduction. So definitely a big short-term impact. The long-term impact, obviously yet to be seen, but I think what we're seeing right now is for a lot of tasks on the field today, it's actually quite hard to social distance and to build all of the good safety practices that we can put in place maybe more easily in other types of environments. So I think that's going to raise a lot of questions as we go to the backside of this. Overall, I agree with Igino and Eric that this is a tailwind for automation. I think different processes are going to be looked at differently based on not only how much they cost, but also how intensively they're using labor and what is the exact setup for that particular process to happen safely on the field. On average, obviously, I think more automation will allow farmers to be more resilient in the future to similar crises.
That's great. So you've all mentioned this tailwind. Do you think that this kind of new tailwind that's picking up here in robotic farming is going to impact the way that you guys approach innovation, or the way that you guys approach the way you deploy your technology?
So on that, I think like very similarly to our customers, we feel like we both have to adapt on the short term and then adapt on the long term. On the short term, like the three of us have fairly small companies. We have startups, and as most small companies those days, like we need to be very cautious about cash and very cautious about the way we're growing today. So I think at least for us, that's very much true. But in the long term, we do see we do expect to see slightly faster adoption of our products, which makes us want to, I think on the backside of it, probably accelerate some of the adoption curve that we anticipated. So it's not a very easy thing to manage, because we have those two effects, the short-term one that is pushing us to caution, and the long-term one that maybe is pushing us in the other direction. So to us, it's about working very closely with our investors and the people who understand the space very well to kind of decide on the timing and when and how to push harder on that tailwind.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to what Seb said there is, at Bear Flag, like we've long known that we have these two major opportunities. One is this incredible technical challenge of building safe, reliable, autonomous machines that can do work better than humans can, and the other is the go-to-market. And while I think the obvious outsider perspective is that Bear Flag has a ton of IP around, autonomous technology, I think the really underrated part about our company is the value that we're generating in this go-to-market, and our ability to iterate very quickly, figure out what channels work for us, what channels don't work for us, and then how to provide the most value and utility, and also increase willingness to pay from customers. And so, admittedly, we've learned a ton in the last year of operation at customers. We've made mistakes, made assumptions that haven't panned out, and our ability to quickly figure out how growers want to consume autonomous and iterate on that is one of the keys to our success, and that's why we will be successful. I think when you look at other technologies that are available to growers, and this is certainly not like a slant on larger incumbents, but they just don't have the flexibility to scale, or I should say flex their distribution channels to different models as quickly. And so smaller companies, and this isn't unique to Bear Flag, this is just startups in general, can experiment much more quickly and make progress there with higher velocity.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I mean, to the question of whether we're going to be innovating any differently, not really. We have the same or maybe an accelerated opportunity, as Seb alluded to. In the short term, if you consider, building process as innovation or sourcing of parts as innovation, those things have had to change. We've had to be flexible as a company around, how we are both buying, procuring, receiving, and then assembling, parts of our robots, just because of our attempts to be as responsible as we can as a distancing company. But other than that, plus in-field, sensitivities to making sure we're doing the right thing socially in the field, working with our customers, nothing has really changed in a macro sense.
That's great. That's very good stuff. One thing that it sounds like you guys are all mentioning a little bit is the malleability of your business model. In the face of COVID-19, obviously, another way that would manifest itself is kind of throughout the life cycle of your business. It's when these new technologies come along and how you decide to leverage those and how you base your business model, upon what the technology is that's out there. I'd just love to hear you guys talk a little bit about how you balance technology in your business model. Do you, kind of apply your existing business model to new technology? What is that thought process? What do those conversations look like within your company?
Yeah, I'm happy to come out with this first. So one of the original theses of Bear Flag is that autonomous looks like a service long before it's a product in agriculture. And so the way that started out in the fall, last year, was going out and basically Bear Flag looked like a custom tillage provider, and we would charge by the acre, and Frankly, the grower wouldn't really give a hoot if it was a human or a robot or a little green man driving the tractor. They were paying for the acres tilled, and that was fantastic for us. We hardened our technology. We understood how this would work, and now as we move to a more hybrid model of growers operating our machines, how can technology help us stay in the cab with them or in the field with them, right? And so, how can we leverage low latency video feeds and real-time customer support and all the analytics and everything, all the data that we're streaming off the tractor to literally, be there virtually with the growers to ensure success with them. One of the key learnings at Bear Flag, and I'm going on a limb to guess that the other people on this panel would agree, growers don't have a lot of tolerance for technology just for technology's sake. They'll give you one, maybe 1.5 chances. And if it doesn't work, they're going to go do it how they know how to do it. And so key to our success is being there with them and making sure that we enable the outcomes that we know we can do. And, leveraging technologies, we can do that. Like I said, over-the-air updates, to teleops, telemetry, customer support, path planning, these are all things we can do virtually, and they're all things that we plan to do to help our customers.
Yeah, I think thanks. Technology and business model obviously go hand in hand. Like we don't see ourselves changing one without changing the other. I think similarly to what Igino just mentioned. We're also offering a per acre service. So we take care of the entire stack of services and technologies that are required to perform the final task on the field. So that's what we're doing today, and that's working well for us because of several reasons. One of them being the flexibility that it gives our customers. The other one being our ability to go faster to market with a product that we know how to operate, as opposed to a product that everyone or any grower know how to operate. Those are the two big reasons why we chose this business model that is working well for us today. I think in the long term, our goal is to stay very close to the customers, both in terms of feedback on the product, but also in terms of feedback on the business model. And different growers, I think we can all agree that different growers need different things. And so the one business model that works well for one grower might not work perfectly for another. So even though today we only have kind of one base model, we do expect in the future to broaden our spectrum of different types of models we can use. But that, as I mentioned in the beginning, that will also go with more maturity on the products and being able to support, from a technology standpoint, be able to support those different business models, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, echoing both of the other guys, business model and technology all starts with what is the grower problem you're trying to solve? Are you creating value for the grower? And then both of those things have to align to that. So, we have components of our contracts that are per pound picked. We have components of our contracts that are per month, per hectare, depending on what the service is and how it makes sense to a grower to solve this problem in front of them. And that's what I'm sure we all think about it the same way, given the other answers. It's a constant feedback loop, but it always starts with how the grower's thinking, what are their economics, what's the value to them, and then what does the technology do for them? It doesn't really matter what the technology is.
So, Brandon, I'll add one other thing, and these guys sort of circled it up. We look closely at equipment sales and equipment, leasing options and things like that. And what my observation is, that robotics is enabling different pricing models where that wasn't before. So anytime you think of leasing equipment, you're typically thinking like on a per hour. Like this, I'm paying for this engine time, not this result. Now, when you look at custom applicators and custom harvest crews and things like that, you are thinking about the product. But previously, in my limited knowledge base, there's not a lot of equipment or hardware that you pay per the result, like either per acre or per pound of food or per whatever the end result is. And robotics is enabling that. For the first time, companies are growers are coming to Tortuga, to Farmwise, to Bear Flag, saying like, how much can I pay per acre? That helps them get their costs under control, but also helps us deliver an excellent product that we know has ROI for them.
Yeah, I agree. And to that point, I think it also makes it very easy to align incentives a lot. Like we all like both our customers and us look at the same metric in terms of what makes sense for them. Like it makes it very safe for them to commit to paying a certain amount. Like if you commit to paying X amount of dollars for a day, the value that you're getting as a grower highly depends on what that machine is going to do over the course of that day, the speed-wise, quality-wise, and so on. If you're paying by the acre and for the final result, it makes it way safer for you to commit to paying that because you exactly know what, as a grower, you know exactly what you're paying for.
Very interesting stuff. But we kind of want to circle back to one thing that Eric had mentioned is as far as the value add from the grower's perspective. And one thing that comes up a lot when we talk about robotics and farming is kind of the labor cost. It's a great opportunity to ameliorate some of those issues there. So I'm just curious if you guys still see that as kind of the main driver here, or if, the post-COVID world that may look different, or maybe it's a different aspect of labor. Just really kind of what you think about that and what potential opportunities are out there as well.
Yeah, I think there's actually a trap to think about robotics only as a labor replacement game. And then therefore all you're doing is comparing direct cost comparisons and performance comparisons. In reality, and Igino kind of alluded to this already too, robotics enables you to avoid the downside risk of labor shortage, which is really a huge pain point. A lot of indirect costs, not just the direct labor costs. And then also, many robotic solutions will enable you to gather data that you could have never gathered before as a farmer. And the way we characterize it, at our company is, our farmer essentially is dealing with three major constraints. They've got the environmental constraint, which is just the climate they're in, the soil they have, whatever they're growing. They've got a labor constraint because really what they're doing is doing a lot of hard work on inputs. And then they've got an information constraint. What hard work do I do at what point in the season? And, by doing the work, you can often gather data to help them decide how to do that work better in the future. And that is value add. That's pricing improvement. That's contracting improvement. That's better visibility in supply chain downstream for end consumers and for retailers and so on. So I think, it is really much bigger than just labor replacement like it was, say, in an auto manufacturing line, when robotics first came out.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when we talk about it, like we don't see a world where farms will run without people. There will always be a lot of people. The type of changes that I think robotics enabled, I think there are three of them. There is one which is around labor, but it's less about replacement. It is about transforming the type of work that the people on the field are doing. Today, you see a lot of people breaking their back, doing very repetitive tasks and so on. I think 10 years from now, with robotics and automation, like you're going to see a lot more of these people having higher paid, better paid, more interesting jobs, managing a fleet of equipment or making smart decisions about what to do when. So that's how automation is, to me, transforming the work that people will still have to do on the field. We will still need people to do a lot of the maintenance, the setup of those machines. And then there is the second type of impact, which Eric mentioned very well, which is everything else that robotics is enabling that is totally impossible to do today. One example of that is as equipment like ours is going through the field, we're capturing a range of very precise information at the plant level. So we're able to tell the grower the size, the health, and the stress of every single one of its plants. This is totally impossible or unthinkable to do by hand or using labor. And that's to me is something that is of great value for growers because that helps them make better decisions, but doesn't have anything to do really with the question of labor.
Yeah, I can't add too much more. I echo entirely what these guys said, and I should have just recorded that for my conversations going forward. The only like the one thing to like call out here, this isn't a cost issue. This is an availability issue. And one of the biggest misconceptions I talk about is People imagine that like one tractor driver equals another, and there's a line of them, and like if one guy leaves, you just pick another guy up and you're ready to go. And this just like couldn't be further from the truth. And so when you think about availability, of course, at the extreme, that's cost. But there's just such a shortage of qualified people to run these operations at your farms. And so when you think about planning and actually drilling down on cost and availability and consistency, it comes back to an availability problem, much less than an operational expense problem.
Great. Yeah. And that kind of leads right into the next question that I had for you guys. I know kind of the big headline getter is all the new innovations, new technology and stuff like that. But it's my understanding that reliability is something that's really important in your industry. That's just, one aspect. And, as far as you guys innovating and the way you approach problems, coming up with really reliable solution is something that's really important and, kind of a core principle of your business. I just like to hear you guys talk a little bit about how you balance, how you talk about reliability, kind of in the context of innovation, how you balance those things, new technology versus let's make what we have that exists even more efficient. I'd love to hear about that.
I'll go first. Super quickly, like we measure our productivity in reliability. If you look at, if in a typical day, like in a 12-hour day, a tractor is only moving about 6 or 7 hours. And so autonomous gives you 3x productivity. If you go to a conservative 21-hour-a-day model, like that's 3x of productivity from that same piece of steel that you're paying to have at your farm regardless. One of the anecdotal stories I'll tell, we're working, obviously, as we scale our fleet, we're working with suppliers. How can we get more tractors and scale quickly? And the models that they use around how effectively and the hours that they put on these tractors per week or per month completely fall apart compared to how consistently and how much we can operate our tractors. It's just, I tell them how many hours we want to put on a week, and they're like, holy smokes, this blows out anything that we're used to. And that's, from a grower perspective, that's fantastic because you're paying for all this hardware to sit on your farm that's just not being used. And so even the savings of Bear Flag, just reducing the size of your fleet because you can use that equipment more effectively, pays for Bear Flag alone before you even start to talk about labor. So yeah, reliability and uptime are just the most supreme metrics that we can follow.
Reliability, obviously a top of mind priority for us. The way we see it is as we are starting to take on commitments more than like we're moving kind of away from the pure test and trial period and on to actual commercial commitments. What we realize is like farmers obviously have very little margin for errors. They first of all are on very tight time windows. So for every single task need to fall into place within plus or minus 5% of the time they anticipated to take because they have other things to do. So you don't really have the opportunity or the luxury to break in the middle of the day for half a day or 2 days. So that's one reason why reliability is really critical. The other reason more on the longer term is the seasons go by very fast. Like in California, most of the vegetable season, the one that we're particularly attached to, really goes on from April to the end of September. And so that gives you kind of half of the year to really grow as much product as you can, and you can't really miss this time window or miss even like a small portion of that time window. So with that in mind, like reliability is a top of mind thing to consider when approaching growth with any new service. I will say not only technologies, but really everything needs to be close to 100% of, close to 99% of actual reliability on the field. Just one last note, sorry, before I give it to Eric, is there are ways to improve that, not only on the technology side, but also on the service side that you put around it. Tools like teleoperations, tools like quick turnaround of either hardware parts or even technicians to show up and actually fix the problems. Those are the type of tools that I think no company bringing a product to market can go around. Those are really critical, at least for us. Like they're very critical things for operations.
Yeah, I would add, reliability is, you have to innovate to have reliability, but innovation touches performance, reliability, and cost. And when you're talking about machines, cost does matter. and cost is a critical part of the innovation. So you kind of always have this trade-off or tension between performance, reliability, and cost, and you have to find the right balance. And agriculture is a particularly challenging industry. It's a commodity industry that needs to be operating all the time on very tight time horizons with, difficult critical paths, as the other two mentioned. So it's a critical part of it. It can't be the only thing. You can't have an expensive piece of equipment that is reliable or a really, really great price piece of equipment that doesn't work all the time. It has to be all the things.
Yeah, it sounds very challenging. So kind of want to shift gears a little bit here. We talked about COVID earlier. Igino, you were a part of this panel last year. I'd love to hear, what have you seen that's changed over the past year in this space? Outside of COVID's the obvious one here. We already talked about that. Has there been anything else, maybe some new technological advances, anything like that comes to mind?
Listen, two major things that just aren't getting better, labor problem and climate change too. So when you look at a company like Bear Flag, the obvious thing that we're helping with is labor, and that's in produce and broadacre crops as well. But thanks, and I'll throw out really quickly, about 20 million acres of U.S. farmland doesn't get planted every year because of weather pressure. Growers are facing shorter and shorter operational windows, and they can't get in and out of their fields quickly enough to plant that. Climate change is there's a lot of ways to mitigate that and solve that. But certainly working around it to increase food production is something that autonomous technology can really help with. And so really pessimistically, what's changed is those things have only gotten worse.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, nothing major has changed to turn the trajectory of anything. It's just everything is more so. In our industry, of course, we're working with farms that are controlled environment, more structured type farms. And what we've seen is that the weather challenges that people might say are weather challenges and not climate challenges have continued to push people towards trying to control their environments a little bit more. Yields are higher in many cases in controlled environment farms that we work with versus their soil counterparts because, for example, hailstorms didn't destroy half the crop. Or folks are already easier, it's easier for people to pick, let alone a robot. So folks are sort of moving away from the soil farms towards things that are easier for their current, worker populations to work with to try to gain efficiencies. Farmers are under incredible pressure, and that's only continued. And I don't think it's changed much. It's just gotten worse.
Yeah, nothing much to add here. I agree with both of these guys. There are the two trends of the pressure on climate change, both from a regulation standpoint and from a consumer push standpoint. Those are really much only accelerating, and same for the pressure on labor.
I guess the one thing to add is, on a positive note, it does feel, and this is very much anecdotal, that the consumer awareness of these issues is increasing, and that people care more and more about, how do we solve these problems, and maybe. One silver lining of a pandemic that's brutal and tragic is that as people see their own food supply change, both in the restaurants that they're able to go to and what they see in the supermarket, they could become more aware of the challenges and the opportunities in the industries that are behind that whole supply chain.
Very good. And I think I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of get to one of these questions we got from the audience. It seems like a nice segue point here, kind of talking about shorter seasons, kind of that impact. We have one of our viewers asking about robotics, and if you guys believe they'll be introduced at any time to smaller farmers, especially from India or South Asia. Kind of want to talk about robotics in emerging markets. Is that something that you guys talk about? Is that something that you guys see potential in? As potentially getting more use out of your product, kind of what we're seeing for shorter cycles.
Yeah, it's something we learned this year. When we think of something like Bear Flag, it's priced against domestic labor markets, and so we really didn't consider emerging markets as a viable place for Bear Flag. Just the economics wouldn't make sense. And then we started talking to growers from Brazil. And they're saying this isn't a cost problem. Once again, this comes back to availability of labor. I can't find people to go out and run my $500,000 machines, for many months of the year, and be easy on them and be reliable, and do the job properly. Like I just can't find these people. And so I'm willing to pay more for technology that gets rid of that problem. It's not a unit economics question. It's just about getting the job done.
Yeah, and so to us, similarly, like we started here because of the unit economics related to the labor markets. We're in touch with several growers. We're not commercially available anywhere else than in the US, but we're in touch with several growers internationally. And most emerging countries are experiencing similar trends on labor as Igino mentioned. I think the last number I remember from a couple of weeks ago, I think India is scheduled to lose 25% of their field labor workforce over the next 15 years. So that is going to push harder on the adoption of automation in those countries as well. And so, yes, I think longer term, I do think technologies are going to start to prove themselves first in markets where the cost of overall, not only labor, but the cost of inputs, the cost of processes, everything is higher, so that it's easier to see the ROI. And what I expect to see over the next 10 years is the cost of the technologies that we're all here bringing to market shrinking. We all have current costs of those technologies that are much higher than what we anticipate them to be in 5, 6, 7 years from now. Both because it takes time for us to optimize our systems, but also the building blocks that we use in our systems, the cost of those building blocks, whether software or hardware, they're going down drastically, not only because of robotics companies in farming, but because of the push of robotics in other industries like self-driving cars and so on, which are maturing maybe even faster than farming robotics, but which basically bring the cost of those technologies down. So as we're going to see the cost of technologies going down and the pressure on very similar trends that are really worldwide trends in emerging countries, we do see those lines. I do see those lines crossing in the next like five years or so.
Yeah, I would add only one thing, which is that there's two parts to the question. One is the international component, and the other is the small versus large farm component. And I think it's hard to argue, any farm equipment is capital. Robotics is extra capital. Capital tends to benefit some scale. So, I don't think that the advancement in robotics will help the smallholder farmer who is already facing incredible pressures. It would more likely assist in the consolidation, but it won't be necessarily all the way to, 2 farms that are growing everything or something like that. But, smallholder farmers face a lot of challenges, and I don't think robotics is going to be some sort of panacea for them. I think, there's always benefits to scale in international and domestic markets.
I think just if I can add something, the only thing that where robotics might be able to help smaller farms, even in the short term, is through innovative business models that we discussed about at the beginning. I think robotics brings with it a need to change or to shift some of the business models, mainly going from a buy and own type of model to a use and pay type of model. And that obviously broadens the scope of or the spectrum of farms that those technologies can help. So I think that's the thing to look at when you're for small farms, looking for those companies who are providing services because they probably make much more sense for you than looking for a piece of equipment that you can buy.
Very good, very good. So I'm gonna shift gears here again a little bit. We got an audience question. All of you guys have engineering backgrounds, so this one will be a little bit more technical. Do robotics companies like yours usually create your own telemetry analytics products? How large a fraction of the business would you consider this to be? If not, are there major players, potential partners in this space? You guys have anything to add about that?
Who wants to go first? I can try. I would say yes in the most part. Like we do reuse some of their either open source software or some of their sensors that other industries like self-driving car industries are using. So we do not like custom build our own sensors. We do custom a lot of our software. So in a large portion, I've said the software is custom and the hardware is pretty much off the shelf.
Yeah, I mean that's the same for us as well. The only thing I'll say is a lot of, and I'm talking to Eric and Seb. A lot of the secret sauce too is analytics that we're getting from the field and how we can turn those into better farming outcomes. Of course, right? So congrats, like you've tilled the field. Well, how can I do it better next time? And so those are the questions we're answering. I think not to read between the lines, but I think your question was a little bit different. And I'll make a quick plug for Freedom Robotics. Basically DevOps robotics companies have already solved a lot of the problems that we have to build in-house. We're integrated with them, and they help robotics companies just in general, industry agnostic, scale quickly across fleets of many robots at once, and so you can maintain and monitor that fleet.
Yeah, at the abstract level, I think my contribution to this question is simply that you always try to optimize what you're getting off the shelf versus what you're building in-house, and your guiding light is always, what does the solution need to look like, and do you need a gold-plated solution, or can you make do with something that's off the shelf? And so telemetry is no different. Localization, mapping, those kinds of things are all parts of the stack, but how much of it is off the shelf and basic and how much of it is your special sauce just depends on your problem.
Very good. Yeah, it's a tough word to pronounce. I'm glad you guys are more familiar with it than I was. Also, kind of one thing I wanted to talk about here is obviously the farmers. I think that managing the relationship with the farmers is something that is a challenge that all you guys face, in one degree or another. We have a question from Alberto here about how many months or years might take to pay off the investment in your robots. I know that a couple of you offer the service model, and then really kind of more broadly, what are the key catalysts to accelerate the adoption of your products?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all mentioned it. The innovation and the business model side of things is to go to a service model where growers get paid back immediately, and they don't have to worry about a payback as a number. This is very different than how growers typically have to think about equipment-related services. So it's a huge deal, and it sometimes takes growers some time to get their head around it, and then they realize how much they're excited about it. So that's really sort of it.
Eric said it.
On the second part of the question, how do we accelerate the adoption? To us, and it seems like I think the three of us are doing pretty much having the same approach. Like it's all about iteration, very close to the customer, and really understanding how they're thinking about those trade-offs, both from a technical standpoint and from a business model standpoint, to quickly adapt to their needs. In general, some of the things we've learned over the past 3 years is that growers very much have different preferences, and so being flexible both on the product itself with actual parameters that you can tweak and so on, but also on the business model and the approach and how you're thinking about those contracts and so on. Those two things need to be to a certain degree variable and needs to be adjusted to growers. That's one thing we've learned that did accelerate the adoption and the appeal of our service to them.
Great. So we got one more minute here, just real quick. I'd like for you guys to go around. If there are any cool projects or startups that are on your radar that you'd like to talk about, anything interesting you've seen, that'd be great. Igino kind of hinted at one earlier. Anything like that, I think the audience would enjoy that. Something to check out after the panel.
I mean, just these three.
Absolutely.
Definitely. You have the best here. But if I had to mention one more, I really like it with all the innovation that's happening on the genetic on the biome of the ground. And there's this one company, very cool company and co-founder called Trace Genomics, who's doing an incredible job helping farmers both better understand the biome in their soil and add organic products that are making the soil not only better for the yield in the short term, but also more sustainable in the long term. I found those type of innovation very cool. I don't understand all of them because they have nothing to do with robotics. They're more on the biology side, but I think this is very cool.
Yeah, Full Harvest is my plug, solving food waste problems. I think they're also on this panel in this event. So Full Harvest for sure.
All righty. Well, that's our time here. Just wanted to thank you guys again for being a part of this. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone.
Bye.